In 2005, congressional hearings were held in the wake of Major League Baseball's steroid scandal. Players like Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa had been juiced to the gills on performance-enhancing drugs to break records for most number of home runs hit in a season. These players were brought before Congress to answer for their sins.
I thought this was a hugely important issue impacting millions of young people.
These hearings were hugely important because athletes were supposed to be role models for young fans of the sport, like yours truly at the time. But these players took a shortcut to greatness and betrayed all of the values that role model athletes were supposed to embody.
They're your idols, and you find out that they're cheating. It just ruins it.
It was a blight on the legacy of all of the players of the past whose records were now broken. It was cheating, it was wrong, it was bad for the sport and bad for the culture.
It cheats you, it cheats the game, and it cheats the history of baseball.
Because they want to cheat, they want to have an advantage.
Because it's unfair, it's cheating, it's not a level playing field.
And the fact that it's just simply the wrong thing to do.
Now, all this damning language that Congress was directing towards baseball players in 2005 sounds very similar to damning language that's directed towards another group of people that maybe is getting ahead unfairly. People who are setting the wrong moral standard for the youth. I'm talking, of course, about people who fake their musical performances on the internet. Over the years, I have been fed a lot of content of extremely edited, one might say, faked content. I've also been fed a lot of videos calling out those people for faking their content.
Right there. Egregious editing. Blatantly fake.
And I find the morality play of it all, very engaging to watch. Who wouldn't want these digital frauds to get their comeuppance? Sinner, sinner. All communities, musical or otherwise, have standards of integrity that they find ways to enforce, whether it be by Congress or Jared Dines. These vaunted lawgivers define what counts as an authentic performance. They weigh nuanced issues of right and wrong. Why is it okay, for example, that Messi has taken human growth hormone? And yes, I know it's totally fine. Argentina, please don't hate me. But why is it not okay that Mark McGwire has taken human growth hormone? Why is it okay that Led Zeppelin fakes concert footage and steals songs, but not these guys, for example? Oh, baby, we got some stuff to talk about today. This is my lukewarm defense and study of faking musical performances on the internet. Keyboard warriors, get your keyboards ready because my takes are hot and I'm ready for battle.
Fuck bad for the community.
Massive disservice to the guitar community.
Simply the wrong thing to do.
Is it the money that drives this kind of practice?
When there's money and clout to be had, some people just can't help themselves.
That's immoral.
It's cheating.
Shame on you.
Shame on you, man.
Cheating.
The level that's presented on there is not real.
Which is not real.
Assuming it's real. What does it do for
the integrity of the game?
Sanctity of the game.
People can't meet these standards.
You're creating impossible standards for yourself and everybody else to live up to.
It needs to stop before it kills the future of this instrument for the next generation.
Think of the future generations.
Millions of young people.
Fuck bad for young people.
Those kids in high school.
Convince an entire generation of young musicians to compare themselves to the falsehood that you wear like a badge of pride.
This video is brought to you by Nebula, where you can watch my exclusive bonus video where I interview a virtue ethicist and ask them to react to fake guitar. Learn more at the end of this video. Part 1. A brief history of faking performances. Okay, so we could define a faked performance as one that has a video of something that is labeled as a live performance, or at least you assume that it's a live performance, but the audio has somehow been polished or edited to be more pristine in a way that might feel unfair, which may be a reasonable definition, but I want to be clear with something here, because this has just been standard practice with basically all visual media for the past 100 years. The major plot point of 1952's Singing in the Rain is that the character Lena is a popular actress who stars in a movie musical, but cannot actually sing. Her singing was all overdubbed by another character, Kathy. The climax of the film occurs when Lena is singing the hit song from the movie in a so-called live performance. Then it is revealed that she is lip-syncing to Kathy singing her lines from behind a curtain. This major plot point was a depiction of so-called ghost singing, which was standard practice in the golden age of Hollywood starting in the 1930s. Actors were, as a matter of routine, overdubbed by much more capable singers, who are usually uncredited until many years later. Much of Hollywood singing for decades was just the same singer putting on different accents. Soprano Marni Nixon, for example, overdubbed Audrey Hepburn's performance in My Fair Lady, as well as Natalie Wood's performance in West Side Story, and Deborah Kerr's performance in The King and I. And of course, Debbie Reynolds, who played Kathy, the ghost singer in Singing in the Rain, was actually overdubbed by a ghost singer herself, Betty Noyes. Now, ghost singing fits our definition of what a fake performance is, but when it was revealed to the public that this was what was going on in these movies, audiences just did not care. In fact, they were mostly just interested in learning more about the ghost singers themselves. They didn't find it deceitful, they just found it interesting. In fact, in South Asian markets, so-called playback singers enjoyed great fame and success. Singers like Lata Mangeshkar would later overshadow those she overdubbed. Now, while we can assume that there's a degree of artifice in cinema, we do think that live concert performance footage is somehow different and more real. But of course, classic live recordings would fit our definition of fake performances too. Significant portions of Led Zeppelin's classic concert documentary, The Song Remains the Same, were overdubbed. Portions were reshot on a soundstage built to look like Madison Square Garden. Kiss's breakout live album, Alive, was mostly overdubbed after the fact because the quality of the performances didn't hold up to scrutiny.
Yeah, we touched up what we had to do, and I think it only made it better. Most people assumed it was all live. It wasn't.
Metallica's famous S&M concert with the San Francisco Symphony had heavy pitch correction, vocal and guitar overdubs, as well as orchestral time alignment. Whitney Houston's iconic quote-unquote live 1991 performance of the Star-Spangled Banner was lip-synced, and it's pretty much the undisputed best rendition of the national anthem that makes 30-something Theory Bro influencers on YouTube go absolutely crazy. God, so good.
Oh my god, these chords are just unbelievable.
I mean, Yo-Yo Ma mimed his performance at the first Obama inauguration. Beyonce lip-synced hers at the second. Artists of the highest caliber do it. And although we associate dramatic falls from grace because of lip-syncing fails like Milli Vanilli and Ashlee Simpson, these cases are extreme outliers in the case of public opinion. So whether or not you personally think that this stuff is deceptive and should be called out, it really doesn't matter because the vast majority of audiences simply do not care. The opinion is that these pieces of media, these live performances, sound and feel great. So who cares if they fit our definition of a fake performance? Which leads to the question, why is somebody like Davin Glover, a teenager posting videos from his bedroom, being harassed on social media because of accusations of fake performance? In other words, why is Davin Glover being held to a higher moral standard than Yo-Yo Ma, Led Zeppelin, Whitney Houston, and Beyonce? Well, there's a couple answers to that question. For one, nobody really doubts the skills of those artists. Their practice of faking performances is understood to be done because of technical limitations or technical reasons. But more importantly, social media has unique pressures that these artists have never had to face, or at least stake their careers on, both on a technical and social level. On the technical level, everything's going through these guys, cell phones, and more importantly, cell phone speakers. Cell phone speakers, of course, are uniquely tuned to the frequency spectrum of the human voice and are not particularly flattering for musical instruments. Only the cleanest and perhaps most sterile sounding audio, especially from instruments like my own, the bass guitar, is remotely intelligible through cell phone speakers. And so people go through great lengths to clean up their audio to sound as crisp and pristine as possible so people can understand what the hell they're even playing, especially when they're shredding real fast, right? This technical constraint leads to an aesthetic and expectation of perfection. But because social media is social media, it can't feel perfect. It has to feel authentic. Authenticity is often performed, which is exactly what I'm doing here with this stupid holding the microphone thing. I never hold the microphone in any of my YouTube videos. This is the first YouTube video where I've ever done this thing. Tom Nicholas made a video exploring the phenomenon of people holding microphones in YouTube videos because it communicates a lack of polish, realness, and authenticity. So musicians come up with ways of performing authenticity, like through cheeky captions or through just posting camera audio, for example. But that's a funny thing because on social media, you are caught between being perfect and authentic. And so that's why we're holding teenage guitarists in their bedroom to a moral standard that is higher than that of Led Zeppelin, Whitney Houston, Metallica, etc. So how do people attempt to be both perfect and authentic? They fake their performances.
The thing I am concerned with is that
we are surrounded by perfection. Everywhere you look on the internet, you're seeing cleanly, beautifully edited music, video, photos. And when you have certain expectations for what a good musician is that are really unattainable without that editing, I think it's sort of our responsibility to not only put out our edited work, but teach people how to edit their work.
Part 2, how to fake musical performances. Okay, so in the early internet, when Flight of the Bumblebee was considered the pinnacle of musical aptitude, people would record themselves playing at a slower speed and then speed up the video a little bit, usually by a factor of 10% to 20%. This made the performance more exciting, and on the low quality webcams, nobody noticed too much. Alternatively, it was common to program the music using a VST like Guitar Pro, for example, and then just mime along to the output of the MIDI guitar. It was a simpler, quainter time in the world of fake performance, but now you can't get away with that as easily. Instead, there's some techniques that most people use to clean up the audio of their performances that maybe could be considered fake performances, including 1, comping. This is the practice of recording the same take several times, but then just selecting the best bits of each take. This used to be done by cutting and splicing different pieces of audio tape together, but is now just standard workflow in digital audio workstations. And it works pretty seamlessly with video. You could be watching a different take than what you're actually hearing. You could also quantize the recording. This is the practice of altering the audio of your performance by being perfectly metronomically in time. You can have this done automatically with a click of a button. Everything will just snap to the grid, but the best, most subtle results usually happen when you nudge individual notes one by one. The third common practice is miming, recording and editing the perfect audio ahead of time and then just miming the performance for video. This is common practice for music videos, but in a lot of live performance videos, you'll see people miming also. Since these techniques of manipulation are well known, you'll see counter techniques deployed to show that you are in fact doing it for real in the video. You could record the video at a higher frame rate, for example, record a video with the DAW showing the recording behind you, posting the raw DI files for people to inspect for signs of manipulation, or most commonly, posting raw cell phone camera audio. Consumers of social media trust the sound of the audio and the look of the video from a cell phone camera much more than a professional camera. It communicates that the sound that you're hearing is the sound that actually happened in the room. Sounds and feels real, right? Wrong. It's easy as hell to apply the techniques of comping, quantizing, and miming to cell phone audio. Just record a bunch of takes of you playing along to a click track, quantize and comp that camera audio, and then overlay the camera audio of the recording that you are playing to. If you want to take it a step further, you could take live recordings of a band, separate out the stems using machine learning, quantize those stems, and then reassemble them to the cell phone video. Now, I realize that in showing you this stuff this way, I am casting doubt on my own ability to play my own music, but it's to show you that in the hands of somebody who can play their instrument and also knows the editing techniques, it is nigh on impossible to detect if something is edited. Even still, there's this great cat and mouse game where people pore over videos of alleged fakers in excruciating detail, trying to find evidence of the crime of editing.
His right hand is not even playing any black notes.
Right there. Egregious editing. Blatantly fake.
His top string is ringing out while he's going to tap.
And you can even hear it processing. And
now, unlike a lot of people out there, I am not super convinced that it's wrong to do something like this. But I do want to spend some time exploring the reasons why people do feel that way, because people feel very strongly about this. Faking performances for some is wrong.
You are literally trying to convince yourself that it's okay to lie to people because of what you get out of it.
Part 3, why faking is wrong. Okay. Take two. Hello, hello, hello. So the first reason why faking is wrong is, 1, it deceives the audience. Audiences expect a spectacle, and sometimes the effort and challenge of a performance is the reason why it has any value in the first place. When that effort didn't actually go into it, it betrays audiences' expectations and becomes effectively slop.
Portraying something that you can't actually replicate online is wrong.
I kind of agree with this argument, but given the fact that for the past 100 years, audiences haven't cared, it kind of is a weak one, honestly. Number 2, faking is wrong because fakers have an unfair advantage over non-fakers. The discipline necessary to perform cleanly is bypassed in favor of trickery. Trickery is rewarded with watch time. Watch time is rewarded with clout, and clout is rewarded with money.
When there's money and clout to be had, some people just can't help themselves.
Money is unjustly gained in 2 separate ways. The first is gigs. For the musical community, Instagram and social media is your professional CV. It's your portfolio in a real way. My band hired Button Masher and Joshua De La Victoria based on connecting with them over Instagram. Now, those guys can absolutely shred, but musicians who misrepresent their abilities are essentially lying on their resume for a job.
Falsely putting out that they are this unstoppable, unbelievable musician when they're not. I know 2 examples recently of drummers that got hired off of their Instagram for live work, and both of them got fired.
This is unfair both to the musicians who get passed over for the job, but also the people hiring them. Money is also unjustly gained through the sale of PDF packages, lessons, Patreon, etc., any kind of monetization scheme that musicians use to make money.
If you want to make a living doing this, you need something to sell.
Students, for Patreon, for everything, right? It's a big part of my livelihood.
Faking performances is kind of like false advertising. You're selling a version of what music is when you yourself cannot uphold that standard that you yourself are selling. Shame on you.
Shame on you.
Shame on you, man.
The third reason why it's bad is that it gives young guitarists an unrealistic standard of musicianship.
If you're making something that is actually impossible and actually perfect beyond human reach, I think for young people it makes them lose their compass of exactly what they should be aiming for.
Like beauty influencers who sell an unrealistic standard of beauty, it warps self-image.
Think of the future generations. Try not to mislead them. Why not help them to do the things that you do?
You know, you say you want to be an influence to all of these younger generations of musicians, but you're just lying to everybody.
Some kid is going to look up to him and wish that they could play that well, and they're never going to be able to reach it.
Now, this one's an interesting one, right? Because how do you even quantify that? Are there examples of young people being harmed by fake performances? Like, what is the data here? It's kind of a hard question to answer, so I did what I always do in these situations, and I consulted my local neighborhood philosopher, specifically Dr. Mariana Noé, a Platonic scholar and Harvard postdoctoral fellow in ancient philosophy.
If a child happens to come across this video of someone that seems to be playing very fast, is that real damage to them or not? There's ways in which it could be damaging. Why? Because this is setting an unrealistic standard. So then they're like, oh my God, he can do such amazing things and I can't. And that can kind of like feed into like a negative self-talk. Or it can even be positive. Like, this guy plays very fast. I'm going to try to be my best version so I can do what he's doing, even if what he's doing is fake.
Is that the noble lie?
Yes, well, yes.
I studied philosophy. So what is the noble lie?
So this is a theory that Plato develops in Republic, in the book Republic, in the dialogue Republic, in book 3. According to this theory, there's some lies that can be used for the sake of basically the well-doing of a society. So for example, one could lie to the citizens and tell them that they're all brothers and sisters, and as a result, one would get a feeling of harmony across a society, which is beneficial in so many ways. So the point is that that no lie is just, it has good effects. So because of its effects, its consequences, it is okay to lie.
Well, what I heard you say is that Plato says that faking guitar on the internet is okay as long as people get better at guitar.
Well, perhaps.
Does it make you push yourself harder? Because there is an argument for that.
Part 4, the noble lie and why it's maybe okay to fake. So there's the story about how young Jeff Beck heard a recording of Les Paul's How High the Moon, and not realizing that Les Paul overdubbed a million guitar parts, Jeff Beck just learned how to play those overdubbed guitar parts on a single guitar, being unaware that a faked performance led him to do something great. This story almost certainly never happened, but what certainly did happen is what happened to Matt Garska, the drummer for Animals as Leaders.
When I heard the Animals' first record, I was like, holy shit, this drummer has the most perfect timing I've ever heard in my life. Meanwhile, it was program drums.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So guess what I started doing? I started drilling stuff like to be perfect. Like just like 2 hands, 2 feet, just trying to get absolutely as perfect as I could. So in a way, that naivety brought me fruit.
It's okay to fake performances because manipulating audio can in fact inspire new musical vocabulary and new ways of expressing yourself on your instrument.
The level of playing has increased so much over the last couple of decades because people are aspiring to play as precise as drum machines.
Jojo Mayer of the band Nerve famously pioneered playing drum and bass grooves live. The genre drum and bass is based on manipulating samples of the amen break in impossible ways that Jojo Mayer just learned how to play.
I became completely obsessed with the idea to reverse engineer those electronic drum beats and play them live on an acoustic instrument.
Caroline Polachek has developed ways of mimicking the way auto-tune snaps vocals to a tuning grid.
I like to switch notes using a lot of like what I call vocal flipping. So like, rather than like, and you'd never hear anything like that in opera.
Russell Holtzman, who actually plays in Caroline Polachek's band, takes what Jojo Mayer did and pushes the limit of what drum and bass is for social media. Charles Caswell, a guitarist regularly accused of faking his guitar playing, has worked out ways of using a manual kill switch to mimic tightly cut guitar playing. So creating an impossible standard isn't necessarily a bad thing because, well, there is evidence that it has inspired people to do great things. So maybe faking is okay? Faking is also okay because music is not a sport or a zero-sum game with winners and losers. Since everybody seems to agree that the point of music is to express an idea through sound and not to crush the competition through superior ability, who cares if it's faked?
Guitar is not a sport.
Music's not a sport. I can do what I want.
It's not a competition. It's not about flexing on other people.
It's not a competition. You can't be disqualified.
You cannot cheat at music. Using the word cheat implies that there's some sort of competitive element to begin with, and that's not there.
Granted, capitalism is a system where there are winners and losers, and we are all trapped in it, but that is a much larger conversation. I'm just guessing here, but I feel like people who are complaining about faking guitar on the internet are not ultimately trying to argue against capitalism, but I might be wrong, so who knows. You know, there are some exceptions to this rule because drum corps is probably what you might consider a competitive sport when it comes to music. And it's also not necessarily a negative thing. I think sports are great. I think competing can actually push you to improve yourself, which is what practice is. And then also like the competition angle, the idea that faked performances are somehow unfair because they yield better results is something that I actually don't necessarily agree with. I think that fake performances often sound way worse. I think they sound kind of lame most of the time. Many people do seem to like the sound of these super edited, hyper quantized performances, which leads me to number 3. People tend to think that faked performances sound cool.
Does anyone else think fake guitar sounds really cool?
Friend of the channel and good guy, Ben Levin, made a series of videos 5 years ago exploring what faked sped up guitar could sound like as an aesthetic statement unto itself.
I basically like the way fake guitar sounds. I think millions of people like the way fake guitar sounds, and I was just saying basically make fake guitar and maybe just tell people it's fake. That'll be an even cooler flex because then you don't need to be perfect. You just love yourself.
The musicians who have been up in arms about faking performances have also almost universally said that they sound good.
It sounds kind of cool.
Because a lot of it does actually sound really cool.
Things that sound cool.
That was really cool, right?
I thought compositionally it was super cool.
Like they agree that the sound of fake performances sounds cool, not even better than non-fake performances, just that it sounds good and cool and fun. Louis Armstrong said, "There ain't but two things in music, good and bad. If it sounds good, you don't worry what it is, just go and enjoy it. Anything you can tap your foot to is good music." Who are we to argue with Louis Armstrong?
Like, they'll just say it's fake, but they won't actually say it's bad music. So I'm like, so do you like it then? Does that mean it's good? Like, even if it was as fake as you imagine it being or wish it was, like, does that mean it's good? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's all I'm going for. I'm going for, like, what I think sounds cool and what I hear in my mind.
Now, French composer Pierre Schaeffer was a pioneer of early electroacoustic music called musique concrète. This style was made from manipulating tape recordings, and concerts were essentially just stages filled with loud speakers. Early EDM concerts, honestly. The hope in this case was to free the sound from its physical context. You weren't hearing like the sound of a violin, you were just hearing sound. He called this acousmatic music, sound freed from the tyranny of physical sources. The inspiration for the term acousmatic came from the students of Pythagoras called the acousmatikoi, who apparently would listen to Pythagoras lecture from behind a screen so that they could better focus on his words and not be distracted by the sight of him talking. So when Levi McLean says this,
the truth of the matter is that if we divorce the audio from the video, it sounds kind of cool. Honestly, I kind of dig it.
He is arguing for an acousmatic interpretation to better appreciate the sound of Davin Glover without being unnecessarily distracted by the visual. It's an interesting argument, right? Anyway, and now I know these arguments defending fake performances are not the most compelling. I said that this was going to be a lukewarm defense of the practice after all. I myself really don't like the sound of these hyper-polished performances. I think they are kind of lame, but not liking something is very different than saying that it's wrong to do. I wanted to defend the practice because the fact that people are okay with the sound of this stuff removed from the visual, they're okay with the acousmatic interpretation.
Honestly, I kind of dig it.
That indicates to me that there is something deeper at play here, something that I've been thinking about for a very long time now. Part 5, genre and morality. So I've been thinking a lot about what genre is, musical genre, and how it relates to what we find valuable in life and society. And I promise you this is going to have something to do with faking guitar on the internet, but it's going to take me a moment to get there, so please bear with me. Now, most consumers of music think of genre as a collection of aesthetics. Drum and bass music needs to be at 170 BPM in order to be drum and bass. Jazz music needs to have swing, blues, and improvisation to be jazz. Black metal needs to sound like it was recorded inside of a tin can to be black metal. This is the definition of genre that Spotify uses. It is a means of selling you different sounds, and you can kind of become obsessed with the taxonomy of it all. We all become Victorian bug collectors at the end of the day in our relationship to music. But the issue that I kind of have with this is that there are many exceptions to this rule. There is music that is at 170 BPM that is not drum and bass. There is music that is recorded poorly that is not black metal. And there is music that has swing, blues, and improvisation that most people wouldn't consider jazz. American bluegrass music, for example, has swing, has improvisation, and it also has the blues. It's in the name, bluegrass. But nobody would get these two genres confused, even though they share these core aesthetic traits. In order to truly define genre, you have to become obsessed with these micro details. And most people don't care enough, honestly, about that, which is why a lot of people say that genre doesn't matter, just listen to whatever sounds good to you, right? However, you would be wrong to think that, person on the internet. Genre indeed does matter. It's just that we have to look at it from a slightly different angle than just a collection of aesthetics to be appreciated. Sociologists like Howard S. Becker talk about art as a community process. The so-called art world of a community is built up from many interactions that go beyond the art itself, if you could even isolate art into just one product, which is what capitalism does, but we're going to go beyond that. Genre communities are art worlds, networks of cultural production, distribution, and consumption. Musicians often do not want to be confined by genre boundaries, but their freedom of expression is necessarily bounded by the expectations of the other performers, audience members, critics, and the diverse others whose work is necessary to making, distributing, and consuming symbolic goods. Now, like with anything in society, communities get together based on shared values. And so, what you can do to identify musical genre is to identify the core value of a given musical community. For example, in the rock instrumental performance community, which is the one that is so up in arms about these fake performances, the core value is athleticism. Now, some people might think this is a bad thing, but I really don't. Much like in the martial arts, athletic ability is seen as a manifestation of deeper values like discipline, attention to detail, and hard work. These are values that the community holds very dear and is core to their identity, not just as musicians, but in a real way as people too. This is why fake guitar elicits such a strong reaction, because it's seen as a betrayal of the core values of the community.
Well, I think it's important to me because it's really hard to do. There's a reason that our heroes are special to us, because they are rare and they have developed rare abilities.
Virtuosity and virtue come from the same Latin root, virtus, meaning merit or valor. These musicians ascribe a high moral value to doing something difficult. Pushing yourself with your athletic ability, with your actual body, is what's valued, and editing something in a DAW is not.
The craft in its purest form is a drummer playing either live or playing in a studio with compression. There's EQ, but there's no sample replacing. There's no quantizing. There's no meddling with it afterwards. What you got is what you got.
In his video on fake guitar, Levi McLean creates this thing that he calls the spectrum of permissibility, which might as well be a legal code for the community. From left to right, it lists audio editing practices that might make a performance sound better based on how permissible they are to the community. For example, EQ cleans up a performance, but it would widely be considered okay. Faking DIs and miming, less so. So this genre community can be defined by its ethical code. It values athleticism. It seems like everybody who is making these videos calling people out on these fake performances, they're trying to legislate some kind of guitar law or musical law through the power of shame. Like they're trying to say, like, shame on you for this. What is the difference then between what they're doing and then what, like, you know, real law is?
So technically Plato has something to say about that. So in the laws, in Book 9, he says that there's some things that cannot be legislated with laws. So for example, the private sphere, what's happening inside the home, what's happening between human beings, if we were to legislate that with laws, people would laugh at us, which means that they will find it funny, but also they will not follow that law.
There won't be any respect given.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for that reason, we shouldn't legislate the private sphere, but rather admonish the people that are doing the wrong thing in the private sphere. So use admonition, shame them.
This needs to be called out.
Called out.
It should be called out, right?
People call them out, and I think it keeps everybody in check.
What these guitar players are doing is they are trying to use that admonition to legislate the action of someone in the private sphere.
Now, what's exciting here is when you start contrasting genre communities and what they value. Let's take a look at hip-hop music, for example.
There's a little code of ethics that we always live by, some honor, some principle, some respect.
Now, hip-hop's core value is not authentic athleticism, but instead authentic lyricism, which is a manifestation of values like wit and cleverness and confidence, as well as honesty and vulnerability. These are things that the community holds very dear as a part of its identity. In order to be authentic, to keep it real, you must write lyrics that are true to your worldview or your life experience. Not only do you have to write your own lyrics, it's important that you also deliver them with your own style. You have to have an intimate personal connection to the musical composition.
We made a conscious effort to not sound like the other guy. It was called biting. And it's against the law in the traditional day of hip-hop to bite somebody's shit.
The easiest way of understanding this is that it's like stand-up comedy. You can't deliver somebody else's jokes. You have to write your own material. That's just the core of the craft. If we take a look at Levi McLean's spectrum of permissibility and apply it to hip hop music, we can see that it's almost nonsensical. Or who cares if you edit your vocal or edit DIs? Like, it makes no sense, right? Which to me shows that genre is defined by the ethical code. The ethical code for one genre will not apply to another. Instead, we might need to imagine a separate spectrum of permissibility for hip hop. On the left, we might say that sampling other recordings, even though you didn't come up with the actual music and the actual beat, is entirely possible. And people do that all the time. And in fact, it's encouraged because it shows that you're being clever with classic recordings, and flipping records is just part of the genre. It's part of the history. You should do that. Quoting lines from other rappers in your lyrics is a little dicey. Like taking one little lyric or one cliche from another rapper, like maybe, and especially if you're doing some kind of commentary on the lyric, maybe, but it's getting into dicey territory there.
These dudes copy each other's shit and they don't credit each other. They don't even say who they took it from. They just act like that's their shit. And that's disrespectful.
Covering a song is just not done. That's for twee acoustic guitar covers on YouTube. That is not part of the hip hop aesthetic at all. It's seen as being corny and probably biting.
You covered a song, but it was still taking something from someone else, and we called it biting.
Having a ghostwriter, having somebody write lyrics specifically for you that you didn't come up with, is beyond the pale. That is the equivalent of faking DIs for the hip hop community. This is because, again, the core value is authentic personal lyricism. You have to express yourself, your wit, your life, you. What's interesting here is we can imagine a spectrum of permissibility for any genre of music, right? You could think of a spectrum of permissibility for punk music, for classical music, for what have you. And of course, you could think of about a spectrum of permissibility for jazz music, the genre that I am most associated with. So let's talk about jazz.
The ethical frame of reference is about achieving balance. That is ultimately what makes jazz so difficult to maintain and to teach. Because at the end of the day, do we want to be in balance with other people?
Part 6. Let's talk about jazz. So for me, the core value in jazz music is authentic collective improvisation. Now, improvisation in this context is not just making up whatever stuff you want or an outpouring of raw emotion, although there is jazz for that. But for the most part in jazz, improvisation is having conversations with other musicians with meaningful musical language.
It's dictated by a very complex language. But like any language, I mean, if you have a 10-word vocabulary, you don't have much to say.
In this way, jazz is a musical simulation of all of the wonderful, complicated ways that people have conversations. And like the best conversations, the best jazz is music where everybody is really listening to each other and hearing what everybody has to say.
Sometimes you don't like what they're doing because you want to control everything that goes on. That's not what our music is. We're playing together.
Now, jazz has a complicated legal code, but for the sake of comparing it to other genres, I'm going to simplify it a little bit here to come up with my idea of a spectrum of permissibility for jazz. On the left, we can say covering a song is totally permissible. Unlike hip hop, most jazz is essentially playing cover songs. That's what jazz standards are. A shared rep that everybody knows and can have a musical conversation about.
If you know the vocabulary, if you're dedicated to it, you can use it to teach yourself about who you are in relation to people who are far greater than you.
It's kind of like Shakespeare. In certain circles, everybody knows Shakespeare. Everybody knows Macbeth. If you want to have a conversation with an English lit professor, you better be able to talk about Macbeth. The same way that if you want to have a meaningful conversation with a jazz musician, it'd be good to know all the things you are. Quoting other jazz musicians, unlike in hip hop, is actually highly encouraged. It means that you have engaged with the history of the music. It'd be like in a conversation about Macbeth, you would be able to quote from memory the relevant portion of the play. It shows to other people that you really know what you're talking about, that you have really done your homework, right? Where it gets a bit dicier on the spectrum of permissibility is writing out or working out your solos ahead of time. This is an indicator that you're not there to have a conversation, a back and forth with other people. You have the one thing that you have to say. This is also different from hip hop where, unless it's a cipher or you're freestyling, Of course you work your stuff out ahead of time, like why wouldn't you? That's not done in jazz because the value is placed on the spontaneity of the conversation. The extreme end of this is working out somebody else's solo ahead of time and playing it as if it's your own. This is like never done. It's like saying in all seriousness that you wrote Macbeth and then trying to gaslight other people into believing that. I really do need to clarify. You should learn other people's solos. You can study them, just don't take credit for them. It's like such a fundamental violation of what the music is. Like, I couldn't even imagine anybody doing that. Let's talk Giacomo Tura.
This is Giacomo Tura, and I guess this is my first apology video.
Giacomo Tura is an Italian guitarist that became very popular on social media because of his upbeat, polished, funky guitar videos. Recently, Danny Sepko, the bass master himself, made an unusually somber video comparing the solos that Giacomo played with other earlier solos from other guitarists. And it's genuinely shocking to watch the side by side. This is something that Giacomo 100% did. He transcribed other guitarists' solos, learned them, and played them as if they were his own, or otherwise very dubiously credited them. On the spectrum of permissibility, this is somewhere in ghostwriter territory for hip-hop. In other words, Giacomo Tura is the Drake of the internet music community. After the scandal came to light, Giacomo became persona non grata on the internet. D'Angelico scrubbed mention of his signature guitar off their website. And, you know, probably for good reason, it is verboten to steal solos. However, there is a long history of people that we deeply respect doing kind of the exact same thing that he did. Led Zeppelin made a career of lightly crediting those they were taking from. David Bennett has an excellent video exploring all the songs that Led Zeppelin could be said to have stolen. And the practice of lifting guitar solos note for note is also not unheard of. The musical language of the people that Giacomo stole from is not particularly original to them. Like, there is a much deeper tradition that everybody is drawing from. In fact, the Alex Hutchings solo that Giacomo stole is literally called George Benson-inspired jam. So is he stealing from Alex Hutchings or George Benson? But of course, there is nuance here, and the brazenness of it and the regularity with which he stole solos is quite shocking. And by the way, if it seems like I'm throwing people under the bus by showing them playing with Giacomo, this is Sungazer having dinner with Giacomo and his band in Sweden back in October. We were on tour at the same time, and his band and he were absolutely lovely. So I have nothing negative to say about them as people in person. Just, you know, maybe don't steal solos, Giacomo. What's interesting to note is that this controversy is not around Giacomo miming his solos, which he very clearly does.
His videos are mostly pre-recorded. Nice whammy bar action here. Personally, I have no problem with that. Sometimes I do the same.
Danny Sapko, at least, doesn't care that much about the mime performances, but definitely does care a lot about the stolen solos. So we can say that Giacomo is not being tried under rock law, but instead under jazz law, where it is absolutely essential that you speak with your own voice through solo. And you know, jazz law has a long history of precedence. There's a lot of nuance to jazz law, which reminds me of another controversy, one in which I broke jazz law. 3 years ago, I was on this show called Dead Wax. At the time, it was called Professional Musicians React with Jack Conte and Ryan Lerman. And it was an episode dedicated to comparing Wolfpack's Deantown, which is this very bass-forward composition, to Weather Report's Teen Town, which is also a very bass-forward composition composed by the late, great Jaco Pastorius, probably the greatest bass player who ever lived. My presence on the show was meant to introduce Gen Z musicians who might be more familiar with Joe Dart and Deantown to the earlier Weather Report and Teen Town as performed by Jaco. During the course of the episode, I was asked a question about how Jaco wrote Teen Town, and I answered it very stupidly. Gives the impression of being improvised almost. And Jaco actually did this a lot. He would write solos out. He was a great improviser, but for most of his recorded solos, they were probably prepared ahead of time. This comment caused a bit of a shitstorm when Peter Erskine, the drummer for Weather Report and close personal friend of Jaco Pastorius, a band, by the way, that I grew up listening to, I was deeply influenced to do what it is that I do by Weather Report. Anyway, Peter Erskine personally called me out on Facebook. With everything else going on in the world, I should pay this no mind, but there's some guy named Adam Neely who's claiming on YouTube that Jaco wrote out all of his solos ahead of time. This discussion, Professional Musicians React, is idiotic, and this guy has no idea what he's talking about. The fawning hosts have no clue. Another internet sensation with over 1.5 million followers. This Facebook post had a lot of people very upset with me, including a comment from the author of this book. Bill Mukowski. It's a bitter pill to swallow when you're trying to introduce people to the musicians that made you who you were, and those musicians are not happy with you. In my defense, I grew up hearing this bit of received wisdom that Jaco worked out his solos from my bass teachers, from many bass teachers. Now, the anger coming from the jazz community behind what I said might seem a bit confusing to people who are not aware of the genre community of jazz and the things that jazz musicians value. But remember, authentic improvisation is a core value for the community. And so, in defense of Peter Erskine, in his view, in a very real way, I was calling his close personal friend, and arguably the greatest bass player ever to live, a fraud. Yeah, so this incident with Peter Erskine taught me a lot. It really humbled me. And it is a big reason why I made this video about fake performances, like how do genre communities enforce social norms. My feelings are very complicated when my band Sungazer plays Weather Report live. We play Palladium occasionally, and yeah, it's weird knowing that Peter Erskine hates me. Anyway, it's easy to dismiss the opinion of an older generation, but that is the generation to whom we owe our values in a real way. Like the role models that I looked up to when I was young, in this case, Ken Griffey Jr. and Cal Ripken, are the ones that give us the values that we will then teach to the next generation. And so to the subject of faking musical performance, I look to who my musical role models are and think about what would they do.
A lot of my heroes played these records where they weren't editing stuff and they were just playing drums and just playing. What you hear is what they actually did. And there's a part of me that wants to aspire to that same level and not lean on the crutch of this technology.
Part 7, role models.
The philosopher Plato defends the idea that we should use certain ideals as inspirations at the moment of trying to become better versions of ourselves.
You know, a lot of the drummers I looked up to are people like Dennis Chambers, Dave Weckl, Mike Mangini, Virgil Donati, Vinnie Colaiuta, Steve Gadd. The list never ends. There's so many musicians.
They all edited their videos. They all quantized with Beat Doctor. No.
I mean, these are really special human beings that have put a lot of work into their craft. And it feels kind of lame to aspire to that same thing and then only go part way and just be like, I'll fix it in post.
So then that's the question, is like, if we are looking at musicians as being role models for us, how do you verify that a musician is a good role model for society, for etc.?
No, in the case of Plato, the answer is through censorship. So you see who is who is becoming a famous poet, you try to see what they're trying to do, limit what they're doing. So it's very, very heavy-handed, one could say.
So my conversation with Dr. Noé ran late into the evening. We talked all about exemplarist ethics and mimesis and Plato. And as the hours waned, sparks flew. She started laughing at my jokes, which is a first among women. If you don't believe me, you can watch the entire interview with Dr. Noé, my philosophical/life partner, available as exclusive content up on my streaming service, Nebula. Nebula is the creator-owned streaming service. It's a great place for curious folks to find interesting and enriching content. I'm up on there. You'll find all my YouTube videos, as well as a sizable exclusive catalog of self-produced bonus content, video essays, and vlogs. There's extra exclusive content for a wide swath of music creators like Tantacruel, Amy Nolte, Volksgeist, 12-Tone, and Polyphonic. 12-Tone and Polyphonic actually have these great videos about genre that I referenced for this particular video. Like Polyphonic's video in particular took a look at genre as a marketing tool used to market to specific demographics. And 12-Tone's video detailed Franco Fabri's formative academic paper on the subject defining genre. 12-Tone and Polyphonic also have an exclusive podcast that you can only listen to on Nebula called Ghost Notes. I even guested on it once. Fun fact. Anyway, in addition to having all this music content that I know that you will like if you like my channel, Nebula is also moving towards prestige content in the indie streaming world, with better stories, better production value, taking independent creators to the next level. Like, for example, in addition to making that video talking about YouTubers holding microphones, Tom Nicholas made a feature documentary on boomers, which touches on a lot of the same subjects about communities and values that we talked about today. That's there up on Nebula. And of course, there's the classic modern travel game show, Jet Lag. It's very fun to watch this show because it's honestly not that much different than touring in Europe. Running around, trying to catch planes and trains. But honestly, I think they could go a little bit further with it. I think they should do a touring musician theme season where all the challenges have to do with touring musicians, like, can you get this bass onto a plane without the stewardesses yelling at you? Can you, I don't know, like carry 100 pounds worth of pelicans through the cobblestone streets of Rome and make it to the gig on time, you know? That's the kind of challenge that I want to see in Jet Lag. If you're interested in any of this, you can go to nebula.tv/Adam Neely or click the link in the description to get Nebula at 40% off at $36 a year, which is just $3 a month. Or instead of a yearly plan, you could go with a monthly plan at $6 a month. You can also use this link to gift a lifetime membership to Nebula to yourself or a friend. Yes, that's right, a lifetime membership. If you want to enjoy all of the wonderful stuff that Nebula has to offer from now until the end of time, you can pay $300 once and literally never pay again. So go to nebula.tv/Adam Neely to get 40% off of a yearly plan at $36 per year, or click the link in the description to get a lifetime subscription to Nebula. And once you're done watching the video with Dr. Noé, let us know if we should start a podcast. We have a bunch of ideas about what we would talk about the intersection between ancient philosophy and music, because there's actually quite a bit that we've found. Anyway, guys, until next time. Peace.